Welcome to S&C Critical Insights. I'm Laura Oswell, a partner in Sullivan and Cromwell's FCPA and anti-corruption practice based in the Palo Alto office.
And I'm Brendan Cullen, also a partner in the firm's FCPA and anti-corruption practice, and I am also resident in Palo Alto. Today we're going to talk about the FCPA, and before 2017, there was speculation that the Trump administration would be a less active, or there were questions about whether the Trump administration would be a less active enforcer of the FCPA. And in January, prior to the inauguration, there was a flurry of activity. 9 of the 32 cases that would ultimately be filed in 2017 were filed in those 3 weeks. And then after the inauguration, there was a 5-month hiatus with nothing filed, no FCPA actions filed. But then activity picked up again, and the remaining cases that were filed in 2017 were filed 5 months post the inauguration, and they generally were in amount and kind of case, amount of sanction, kind of case, size of case, comparable to what you would see in a typical, what I guess we would have called a typical year prior to 2017. And by the end of the year, an amount of penalties and sanctions and disgorgement had been levied that were very much in line with what you'd expect to see in kind of an average year, down from 2016, but 2016 was a very high year for sanctions and penalties in the FCPA. So aside from those sort of high-level statistics, Laura, did we see any trends? Have we seen any trends emerging in FCPA enforcement over the last year or two?
There have been a few things that we've noticed. The first is the continued pattern of a new form of resolution that we saw first in 2016, being the declination with disgorgement. So prior to that time, the DOJ had declined to prosecute actions, and we've seen things like non-prosecution agreements and deferred prosecution agreements. But now we have this new concept of a declination with disgorgement. And I understand the DOJ's position on this is that even if they decline to prosecute, if they've found that a company has achieved ill-gotten gains, they're not going to allow that to kind of remain with the company regardless of their cooperation. The DOJ has used this resolution tool as a means to promote its emphasis on cooperation, and by publicly acknowledging cases where it's declining to move forward, is trying to encourage companies to come forward and cooperate consistent with its past guidance. We saw this in 2017 in both the Lind and CDM Smith enforcement actions. In those cases, the companies disgorged profits of more than $15 million, but were not subject to additional enforcement penalties, and get to also disclose that they were not subject to prosecution as a result of their cooperation. The second trend that I think we've seen building for several years now, and which continued in 2017, was the pattern of international cooperation. We saw that in the Telia and Keppel enforcement actions this year, with multiple international jurisdictions working alongside the SEC and DOJ in prosecuting those actions. Telia was quite remarkable, with the SEC listing agencies in 10 other countries as assisting in its efforts to bring an enforcement action against Telia. This changes the dynamics for companies that are contemplating self-reporting into one that's not just about whether or not you report to the DOJ and SEC in the United States, but whether you need to report to agencies in other jurisdictions in which the companies operate, and whether those other jurisdictions may already be investigating and may essentially bring the DOJ and SEC into the fold. The third trend, we'll call it, which has turned out to be maybe not such a distinct trend yet, but which we anticipate becoming a bigger deal, is the prosecution of individuals. In 2015, the DOJ issued the Yates Memo, which emphasized the importance of and the DOJ's focus on individual prosecutions, and reiterated that guidance late in 2017. The statistics on enforcements against individuals in 2017, however, remained consistent with past trends. However, we expect this to be an emerging area of focus and demonstrated difference in the prosecutions, the delay being caused by the fact that it takes a lot longer. It has typically taken a lot longer for individual actions to materialize, and those are the cases that are typically litigated. But we've seen an example already in 2018 with the single enforcement action in the FCPA space announced to date being a DOJ case against an individual in a matter that's been under prosecution since at least 2014.
So we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that students of the FCPA and practitioners of the FCPA and people who are just interested in how the FCPA has been enforced over the years should go direct their browser to fcpa.stanford.edu, where they will find the FCPA Clearinghouse, which is a joint project between Sullivan and Cromwell and Stanford Law School, and that collects every single resolution of every FCPA enforcement action, as well as a bunch of basically every other available document related to that enforcement action in a highly searchable database that is invaluable, particularly if you're interested in seeing if you can detect trends, and you can search in the advanced search function for every kind of resolution, any kind of geography, any kind of bribe payment, any kind of industry. All those sorts of parameters you might think to search are available for searching in a way that was simply not available prior to the creation of the FCPA Clearinghouse. And a lot of what we just talked about was stuff that we were able to put together rapidly, courtesy of the FCPA Clearinghouse. And with that, thanks for listening to our podcast. For more information about our practice, please visit us online at www.solcrom.com.